we have been discussing about the Greek philosophical thought with the trilogy of Thales, Anaximender and Anaximenes. We will be delving further in this trilogy of Thales, Anaximender and Anaximenes today. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Now, the trilogy of the early Greek philosophers, starting with the father of philosophy, Thales, followed by his disciple Anaximender and Anaximenes, are considered the gateway to Greek philosophical thought because they were the first thinkers in Western history to seek natural explanations for the world, moving away from mythological and religious narratives. Now, before we delve in further, let us see the reasons why this trilogy is considered so important in Greek philosophy vis-a-vis Western philosophy. Firstly, the three of them stood for rejection of mythology in favor of reason. Before them, explanations of the universe were grounded in mythology, like those in Homer, where gods controlled nature. The Milesians broke with this tradition. They asked questions like what is the underlying substance or principle, arche, behind everything? They sought rational, consistent and naturalistic explanations. This shift marks the birth of philosophy and science in Western tradition. Secondly, the trilogy made the first use of natural causes, not supernatural causes. Thales explained earthquakes, for example, as caused by water movement under the earth, not for someone's wrath. Anaximander described a cosmic order, cosmos, regulated by balance, not divine intervention. Anaximenes explained changes in matter through physical processes like condensation and rarefaction. They laid the groundwork for scientific inquiry, understanding the world through cause and effect. Thirdly, the trilogy went on for a search for a fundamental principle, arche for Thales and Anaximenes, epeiron for Anaximander. Each proposed a single principle underlying everything. Thales' arche has been water, Anaximander's epeiron, the infinite. Anaximenes' arche, air. Thales, Anaximander and Anaximenes are thus considered the gateway to Greek philosophical thought because with them comes the rationalistic structure of thought process. Now, if we discuss further about the trilogy, we see that they are marked by shift from mythos to logos, which is before them explanations of the world gained through myth, gods, supernatural forces and poetry. The Milesians were the first to explain natural phenomena without invoking gods. Rain, for example, was not Zeus crying, but condensation. The earth was not held by a god, but balanced in space as by Anaximander. Why it matters? It matters because this shift represents the birth of philosophy and science. Further, the search for a fundamental principle, arche, each proposed that the cosmos is governed by a single underlying substance or principle. As displayed in the PPT here, for philosopher Thales, arche has been water, nature of arche has been concrete and observable. Anaximander clearly has been epeiron, the boundless, which has been in nature abstract and infinite. For Anaximenes, arche has been air, in nature of it is concrete and dynamic. So we see that they had introduced the idea that everything has a rational cause rooted in natural processes, a crucial idea for philosophy and science. Further, the trilogy had a rational inquiry and observation, questions. With them, questions started pouring in. They asked questions like, what is the universe made of? How do things change? Can everything come from one thing? Now, it is pertinent to observe that their answers, while speculative, were based on observation and reason, not divine revelation. Why it matters? Because this is the core of philosophical thinking, which is critical and logical analysis. Further, the trilogy is known for pioneering cosmology and natural science. They attempted the first models of the universe. Anaximender, for instance, proposed a cylindrical Earth floating in space, radical for the time. They introduced the ideas of equilibrium, opposites, and motion, foundational in later physics and metaphysics. Why it matters? It matters because their work laid the intellectual groundwork for later thinkers like Pythagoras, Heraclitus, Parmenides, Plato, and Aristotle. We also see that the trilogy's influence on the Western philosophical tradition is palpable. They inspired the Ionian tradition of philosophy and science. Later thinkers often referred back to them. For instance, Aristotle saw them as the first philosophers in his metaphysics. Their quest for unity and order in nature continued through Plato and Aristotle. So in a sense, we see that the trilogy of Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes are considered the gateway to Greek philosophy. For they abandoned myth and embraced reason. They sought natural causes and principles. They asked fundamental metaphysical questions about existence, about change, and about substance. They began the philosophical tradition that would evolve into logic, ethics, metaphysics, and science later. They opened the door to critical thought, and everything from Socrates to modern physics walks through it. Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes were all pre-Socratic philosophers from Miletus, and they considered part of the Milesian school of natural philosophy. While they shared a general approach to understanding the cosmos through natural causes rather than mythology, they had differing views about the fundamental substance of the universe, the arche, and their relationships were more of philosophical succession and development rather than clear support in the modern sense. Thales, as we know, is considered the founder or the father of philosophy, the founder of the Milesian school. He had proposed that water is the fundamental substance, arche, of all things. He is likely influenced by observation of life's dependence on moisture. He did not leave any written records, however. Most of what we know comes from later sources like Aristotle. Anaximander has been a student or an associate of Thales. He disagreed with Thales and argued that no known substance like water could account for all opposites in the universe. He proposed the apeiron, the indefinite or boundless, as the origin of things. The apeiron is an abstract, eternal, and infinite principle from which all opposites, hot, cold, wet, dry, emerge and return. He developed a more abstract cosmology suggesting natural laws governed the universe. His philosophical stance has been that he moved beyond Thales's material monism to a more metaphysical and abstract principle. And the last of the trilogy, Anaximenes, has been a likely student of Anaximander. He criticized Anaximander's apeiron for being too vague or indeterminate. He proposed air as the arche rather than apeiron, which is observable but capable of transforming into other elements through rarefaction and condensation. The philosophical stance of Anaximenes has been that he attempted to bridge the material world and the abstract world. Like Thales, he picked a tangible substance, and like Anaximander, he explained change in terms of a dynamic process, rarefaction, and condensation. So about the trilogy, if we check the PPT here, we see that the summary of the philosophical influence, Thales' relation to predecessor, founder, Anaximenes, possibly student of Thales, he agreed with the natural explanation of cosmos. He disagreed on water as arche. Anaximenes' relation to the predecessor, possibly student of Anaximander, he agreed with the need for a single arche and natural process, and he disagreed on or rejected Apeiron, chose air instead. So we see that the trilogy, they all influenced one another, forming a chain of development. No one supported the other fully, rather each built on and critiqued the ideas of his predecessor. Their common goal was to explain the universe through rational and natural principles, moving away from mythological explanations. To elucidate the intersectional and dissectional engagements with the trilogy, we must look beyond a simple historical or linear account and engage critically with how their ideas intersect, diverge, and contribute to the formation of Western philosophical and scientific traditions. Number one, contextual framework. These three thinkers, often referred to as the Milesian school, are the first recorded Western philosophers who moved from mythological to natural explanations of reality. Their inquiries laid the foundation for natural philosophy, which would eventually become science. Their intersectional engagements also here refers not in the modern sociological sense as in identity politics, but as a cross-analysis of shared themes, methods, and philosophical aims. Several interesting key intersections emerge. First, search for arche Apeiron. All the three philosophers were concerned with the underlying principle or substance arche of all things. Continuity and change. All the three posit continuity between phenomena and transformation as a process governed by natural laws rather than divine whims. Anaximenes' rarefaction, condensation, can be seen as refining Thales' simplicity with a more dynamic process, while Anaximander introduces abstraction, moving beyond physical elements. The intersection here has been a proto-scientific method is emerging, a tendency to hypothesize, generalize, and seek causes. The third intersection of the trilogy can be gauged vis-a-vis their cosmology and order. Each offers a cosmological model to explain the world's structure. The Earth's floating on water, Thales, suspended in equilibrium, Anaximander, supported by air, Anaximenes, reflects evolving metaphysical assumptions. The intersection here is that they share a holistic cosmological vision, the idea that nature is an interconnected whole governed by principles that can be rationally known. Now, it is also important at this juncture to talk about the dissectional engagements. Again, dissectional here refers to analytical separations, critiques, and internal ruptures, points where these thinkers diverge or even contradict one another. Number one, from concrete to abstract. Thales posits a tangible element, water. Anaximander breaks from these with the Apeiron, a non-empirical metaphysical principle. Anaximenes returns to physical element air but adds process-based logic, compression, expansion. So the dissection here is Anaximander marks a critical philosophical rupture. He is no longer grounded in sense experience, thus anticipating metaphysical thinking later found in Plato and Aristotle. Number two of the dissectional engagement, theological and ethical dimensions. Anaximander suggests that beings pay penalty and retribution to one another for injustice. This introduces an early ethical cosmology. This idea is absent in Thales and Anaximenes. The dissection here can be gauged from the fact that Anaximander introduces a moral dimension to cosmic order, possibly influenced by Orphic or Eastern religious ideas. Methodology. Thales is primarily empirical and observational. Anaximander is speculative and theoretical. Anaximenes attempts a synthesis empirical grounding with theoretical abstraction. Thus, the dissection in the trilogy is that it displays a spectrum from empiricism to abstraction. This dissection anticipates future divides in epistemology. The fourth dissection can be referred in their critical reflection. These early thinkers demonstrate the birth of philosophy as a self-correcting, evolving discipline. Thales's reductionism is both brilliant and limited. Why water only? Anaximender's Epeiron is radically modern, a precursor to metaphysical and even quantum speculation. Anaximenes' model hints at process philosophy, showing early glimpses of dynamic systems thinking. Thus, the intersectional threads show the emergence of shared philosophical concerns, unity, origin, change, while the dissectional shifts highlight growing epistemic sophistication and the plurality of explanatory models. Contemporary relevance. The trilogy of Thales, Anaximander and Anaximenes, when we gauge, we see that in philosophy of science, it reflects the enduring tension between empirical observation and theoretical speculation. In metaphysics, the evolution from water to Epeiron mirrors debates about substance, process, and the unobservable. In environmental thought, their elemental focus invites us to reconsider primordial relationships with nature, air, water, the infinite. Thus, we see that the trilogy of Thales, Anaximander and Anaximenes, when read through intersectional and dissectional lenses, is not a flat sequence but a dialectical unfolding, each thinker building upon and contesting the previous. Their engagements mark the beginning of a long tradition of philosophical questioning. What is the world made of? How does it change? And how can we know? They may not have had final answers, but they asked the right questions, and in doing so, they set philosophy in motion. The trio of Thales, Anaximander and Anaximenes thus has been discussed extensively in the foundational texts of ancient philosophy as well as in modern scholarly books on pre-Socratic thought. There are some recommended reference books, both primary sources from ancient philosophers like Aristotle and secondary scholarly sources where their ideas and contributions are explored. Some of them are the primary sources and classical references. These are not books as such written by Thales or Anaximander or Anaximenes. They wrote little or nothing that survives, but they are where ancient authors describe and preserve their ideas. For instance, Aristotle's Metaphysics, especially Book 1, Alpha, where Aristotle discusses the origins of philosophy and names Thales as the first principle. Also discusses Anaximander and Anaximenes briefly. The recommended translation is Metaphysics, Penguin Classics, translated by Lawson and Tankard. Now, the other possible primary sources and classical references for further reading is Simplicius's commentary on Aristotle's Physics, who has been a 6th century Neoplatonist who preserves many fragments and testimonia about the Milesians. It is especially important for Anaximander's fragment, the only one we have. Third, Diogenes Laertius, with his Lives of the Eminent Philosophers, and Diogenes, a 3rd century biographer who compiled anecdotes, sayings and doctrines, and it includes entries of on all the three. Similarly, besides the primary, the secondary scholarly sources and modern scholarly works could be Professor J.S. Kirk, Raven and Schofields, The Pre-Socratic Philosophers, which is a standard academic reference with translations, commentary and detailed analysis, and it covers Thales, Anaximender and Anaximenes thoroughly, and this work is ideal for students of philosophy and classics. Professor Jonathan Burns, The Pre-Socratic Philosophers, which is highly readable and analytical. And this work of Professor Burns offers context, criticism and detailed discussion of fragments and theories. We also have Guthrie's work, A History of Greek Philosophy, Volume 1, the earlier Pre-Socratics and the Pythagoreans. And here it is a comprehensive and authoritative work. It situates the Milesians with broader Greek thought. Further, there is also the work by Daniel W. Graham on the texts of early Greek philosophy, the complete fragments and selected testimonies of the major pre-Socratics, which is a modern updated editions of the fragments. So people interested can further go ahead with this, for it is a good read for direct engagement with what remains of their thought. We also have, last but not the least, James Warren's Pre-Socratics Natural Philosophers Before Socrates, and it is a very accessible introduction. It is suitable for both students and general readers. So these are definitely not limited, but just about a list where interested minds can go through the primary and the secondary sources, the modern scholarly works from which most of the discussions have been cited from. Thank you so much.